So in the last video, what we have seen is we built these applications, and specifically this uh, input element, OTP input element, using, and we extend it using JavaScript. So basically if you type 1 2 3 4, it will work like this, and it will also trigger an event. So we build this using our custom JavaScript based on the JavaScript written on page level. And I also show you in my previous videos that you can put this inside this JavaScript file, and you can host the JavaScript file into some CDN like AWS S3 or some storage functionality provided by Cloudflare as well. So you can use this, and then you can put the JavaScript files link in here, so that will also work. And if you want feature to use in every page, then you can put inside the meta tags. Now coming into this video, so this video we will take this and build a plugin so that we can use it. So now let's see what will be the plugin will look like. For example, if I add a plugin and I can write OTP plugin or OTP input, you can see this OTP input that is showing like by Sandeep Sadhuga, that is built by me. If I install it, so it will show here. So now what you can do is basically, let's see. So now after installing the plugin, you will see that we have an extra element provided in the bubble search box. So you can take it and you can drag and drop it. So now you can see it is looking like OTP like things. Now I can just center it, and I can show you that there's a lot of options are there. For example, I can change the character count to, for example, 6. So 6 OTP inputs will be shown. The input type can be number, text, or drop down. It can be autofocus or not by checking this. Also I can check if it is disabled or not, and all the styles will be given from these things, like gap between input. So the input between the gap is, let's say, 12, and this is in pixels. So if I put 12, it will be more gap. If I put 2, then it will be less gap, right? That now border width, for example, if I not disable it and I change the border width to, for example, 5, then it will be a big border radius, very thick radius. Now I can change the border color. I can change it to red, or background color to something like black, or let's say black, or I change the font color from here to white, so that it will be shown here. So you can do it like that, and I can preview it. For example, of course it is not working because it is not inside this. So this input is creating the issue. So for example, if I use it inside the container, then it will show as a column structure. Okay, so now I did this. Now the issue will not happen. Okay, so now this is fine. Now this is our custom built OTP input. Okay, now we can use a lot of things. For example, for example, here I am relying on the toolbox plugin to show the alert. What I can do is I can just listen to a event provided by the plugin, the OTP inputs completed, and then here I can just copy paste this alert. For example, copy and just paste it, and here it will be this inputs value. Okay, if I show you, so for example, not here, see the OTP is showing. Now this works, and basically this works because this plugin has all the code and you can just plug and play. So now let's see first that what is the need of building a plugin. Basically, why we need a plugin, because currently it is perfectly working with, if I delete it, it is perfectly working. So why we need building a plugin? So mainly 3 reasons. One is maintainability. As I show you, for example, you have to maintain this style, and you to provide it inside in every page that you use this plugin. Or maybe suppose you you are using this in 2-3 elements, for example, then suppose you change the logic here, so you need to make sure to change in all the places where you are changes the things. For example, you are putting this inside a file, JavaScript file. Okay, so that means you have to update the JavaScript file that externally, you have to test it, so all this stuff. And for example, there are currently 4 input. What if I need 5 input or 6 input? It might maybe need to change the code here, maybe because you not written a code like way, so you need to change your logic here to cater with multiple inputs like that. Second thing is reuse across app. Now for example, if I write a code once and package it as a plugin, then you can reuse this plugin across your application. You have maybe 5 or 10 Bubble application, you want to use this plugin in 5 of those, so you can just install it and just start getting use. You can start using it. But for example, you are using like this script tag way, so now you have to copy this and you have to paste in all way. You have to also test it if this works or not, so which is not maintainable. Now for example, you are changing the link of the JavaScript file, so you have to change the link or the code in every application that you use and in every page actually. So that is a lot of headache, so that is maintainability, and you can want to reuse across the application. Third is that you can publish a package for free or for paid, and you can contribute to the Bubble community. If it is paid plugin, then you can also earn from it. But for example, if it is free plugin also, for example, this is a free plugin that is developed by me, so so I build this so people can reuse it, they can see my work and eventually they can benefit from it. So that's the main goal. So these 3 ways, that is why Bubble provide you option to building plugins. Now let's see how we can build a plugin, and you can just take the logic here and package around it and make a plugin, and that you can use in every Bubble application. Okay, so first of all, you have to look into the Bubble docs. I will recommend that after viewing this video, you should read this thoroughly, because you have to learn these things for yourself. Just a second. Sorry, my network was disconnected. Now I am back. So basically you have to read these things, how you can use the plugin editor and all, but let me show you how you can use it here. Okay, so let's start building it. So basically we will build in local so that we can test, and then once it's final, then we can just paste our code into the plugin editor. So first come here and create a new plugin. For example, you can write anything, OTP, let's say OTP plugin, you can name it, and then I just create the plugin. So this is name is OTP plugin. You can add a logo, you can add description. So these are useful when you are publishing to your application to marketplace. Okay, so I am not going into this. You can just read this data. That is not important thing, that is easily can be done by you. So now there are a lot of tags are there. So what you need to build a element. So that's why you have to click here and you have to add a new element. So now let's see the element display. So what should be the name of the element? So we will just see OTP input, and we will click OTP input. So that is fine. And category you can just do as a input form, because this is as a input basically. This is called a OTP input. Now we have to show you that what are the things that people can select. So I am just clicking on resizable responsive. People can changing this font size, something like that. So this is basic stuff. And now what is so whenever we drag a things, for example, when you see that whenever we drag the OTP plugin from here, it takes a default width and height. So this is 350 into 50, 350 width and 50 height. So that is defined from here. So I can just change it to 350 to 50, because that looks nice by default. Now you can change it as well as per your need. Now the field that you need to use them to customize the plugin. This field this field are equal to this field basically. So this is we have character count, input type, autofocus is disabled, something like that. So let's just add this. So we have character count, that is how much input will be do. So this is 4 character type, that is 4 input are there. This is 6. Okay, simple, something like that. Because if we want to more customization, so we need to give our user more customization so that they can use in any type of application. So for example, character count, I can write this as a character count. This will be a dynamic value and type will be number, and default is 4. So 4. Now before that I have to add a app ID to test this plugin. For example, I am just uninstall this plugin and I am installing this plugin. So that is we are developing it currently. So I am custom code with I have to copy this ID and I have to paste it here and then click go to test app. We are on OTP page. This is missing element because we just uninstall it. Okay, that's fine. Now we have to after refreshing it, you will find that there is OTP input, that is what we are testing. So basically you can see the testing things because we are not published this application. This is the testing app, testing plugin. So you can just drag and drop it. This is what we built right now. So see, the character count is showing like here 4, and now you have the font styles, we have the layout, etc. Right, default is 315 to 50. So that perfectly works. I can just make it horizontal. I just let me delete this input. Okay, so let's see. This is the now no plugin preview is available because we did not add any code for this, so that is why. So let's see what other fields are there. So for example, one is character count, one is for example autofocus. So this autofocus means basically by default when you refresh it, then by default first input is focused. What if we don't need it? So that is why we are adding this property. If this will be a checkbox, if this is checked, that means we want autofocus on page refresh. But if this is not checked, that means we don't want it. So we will by default it will be true, that means it will be checked. Third element is third field is disabled. So if this element should be disabled or not. Okay, that is also you need from user. So this can be dynamic value and yes no value, and by default it will not disabled, that means it will be enabled. And then we have input type. Now input type is something new. So basically for example currently we can only enter number. For example, here we cannot say ABCD, but what if the code, that OTP code is contain also letter, something like that, then you need to provide them option to put letters as well, that is alphabets as well. So for that we will ask them that if they want it as a text, or it should be only numbers, or it can be password as well, because if we are pasting some password like that, so we want them to show like this dot thing, so that is password view. So that is also we need. So this is drop down and the choices should be in between comma. So you can write text comma number, just a second, text comma number comma password. Okay, so there will be 3 options. By default, let's take the text. If I just refresh it, you have to refresh it, okay, to see the changes. It will not work real time. So you have to refresh it whenever you make some changes in the plugin editor and you want to see the latest code. So here you can see that this is character count by default 4, autofocus checked, disabled no, and input type there's 3 options: text, number, and password. Okay, that is done. Now let's see that export state. So what it says that states let user access data from its element in bubble editor. So basically, we have seen that whenever we select this element, for example, in some other element, for example, if I just add a text here and I say that OTP is, and if I add insert dynamic data, and if I do like OTP input yes, now here is the state. So this by default bubble provide width and height, but here we also need completed or completed and value states, so that we can use that, we can access this elements value. So for example, so we have to expose the states from bubble editor, so we can use value. So this will contain the data, real-time data of the OTP that is filled by user. So for example, if I see this, so it should say 4332, so that we can use this value inside bubble editor, inside any action or something. And this will be a text, because as I said that it can also be in text as well. For example, this A, so this text can be as well, that is why I'm saying it as a text. Now we also need a new state, that is completed, and this will be a yes no field. So basically, I also want to know that if this OTP is filled by user or not. That is why I'm just exposing this state, so that we can use it in bubble editor. We can use the value in bubble editor. Now event, now that I already shown that here it is JavaScript to bubble event that is built in previous using the toolbox plugin. We are using this event, so whenever the OTP is completed, it will call this event and it will show this alert, and here we will accessing it value. So this event now need to be triggered by our plugin itself. So here event, I have to type completed. Okay, so now it will show like this. Okay, so now let's refresh it to see the changes. Okay, if I click here to add event, inside element you can see that is a OTP input testing completed, event is now coming. If I click it and if I show some alert here, I can show it, because whenever the input is completed from this element, it will trigger this event and this workflow will run. Okay, and now here inside OTP testing A, I can just use the value property. Okay, let's print out the completed also or not completed, and I just use this. Okay, completed, it will be OTP inputs completed, and let's enter it. If I refresh, nothing will work because we did not add any logic into it. It is just a scaffold. Okay, so the input is not even showing. Okay, it is just taking the space here. So let's just delete it, delete this group inputs, so that we can only see the plugin code. So just refresh this page. Okay, nothing is showing as always. Now let's go to the code editor and just build it. Before that, let me show you that what are the things that are we have to provide in plugin editor. So now now this is the element action. So basically, if you want a client action to this, apply to this apply to this bubble plugin element, then we can do it. For example, if we want to create a action, for example, set OTP, that we want to set some OTP on page loads, for example. So for that, I can add a state here. For example, let's say I add a custom state set. So now it also take a new field. So let's say new field is OTP value, for example. It will show like OTP value. It should be a dynamic text, same as the the data. For example, if I refresh it, now on page load or something like so, for example, on page load we can set OTP, we can run this action set OTP. So now we can provide the OTP 1234, then on page load it should fill the OTP here. So that is the use of this action, element action, that will also we will see, but in next video, not this video. Okay, now here is the element code. So basically let me tell you in brief. So this element code is basically a HTML endpoint. So you can add any HTML code here. HTML code means you can add CSS, you can link the CSS here, or you can link JavaScript file as well here using script and link. So this is a JavaScript, I can say checkpoint, you can add data here. Now these two are the most important functions inside Bubble plugin. One is initialize. Now function I already discussed about in the previous video, that what is function. Function is just like a custom event in Bubble. So this is similar in JavaScript, we call it function. So now the function initialize will call only once per instance. So basically if there's only one element, so it will run this code, run this function only once. So this data are sending, like instance and context data are sending. So both are as a object, that is this is both are JavaScript object. So instance has a canvas. Canvas is basically a div wrapped in a jQuery object. Now for example we don't need a jQuery, so you can go to the general tab or CR tab and you can uncheck this, because we will not use jQuery, we will use only JavaScript. So uncheck it, then come here. Okay, so now it will say that it is just a div DOM. Basically this is a element, referred to element. Publish state. So basically I have shown you that you have to update these two values, value and complete it. You have to update it whenever user fills something. So you have to use publish state to publish the state. And there's a trigger event. Trigger event basically whenever OTP is filled by user, we can just trigger this event. Data is basically not a, it is just a object. You can add some data, write some data and read some data. Context will not used in this plugin because we don't need any context data. But for example you want to need the custom user into the plugin, so you have to use context.current user, something like that. Okay, in this plugin context will not needed. Okay, now second most important thing is the update function. This will call wherever a field or value is changed. So basically this has these properties, because car count autofocus disabled, this value I provided here. Okay, that is done. Now we also has properties.bubble. So basically properties has 5 values. These are custom defined by us. This is Bubble element. For example, we can access font size, font bold, italic, bold, underline, this stuff from properties.bubble.bold, and it is a function, so you have to add curly braces. So we will see this, don't worry if you don't understand it at once, I will explain it again. So this is the update function. So whenever, suppose for example initially it was character count 4, but for example we change it as a 5, or for example you can better understand as a disabled input. For example when some process is running, I want to disable this field, so I will change it as a disabled is equal to yes. Now by doing this update method will call, and it will run this, it will run this, and then our code will update our inputs to disabled. So same again, if we are defining any condition of, for example current user is current user is logged in, then I want to show the input type as a number, for example, for some reason I don't know, but for example this type of things you want to use. So whenever the current user will be logged in, it will call this update function again, and then our responsibility will be to change the input type as the things that mentioned here, right? So that's it. And the third is preview. So preview is nothing but that you add the code so that it will show here. So now this I will show in next video, because this is not important. This is just for our preview stuff, so that we can see it here. Otherwise this will it will only work the edit mode, basically this mode, not in run mode. Okay, so this is the preview, and now here it comes the initialize value function. Remember, we are exposing the state, value and completed. Now what will be the initial value? Okay, for example, when we set a custom state, we need to give a default value, right? So this is same as, so for value, we for example, when the page is loaded, the value will be empty string, because there's nothing input, user is not add any OTP. That is why it will be empty input. Now for completed, if the OTP is completed or not, initially it will not complete it, so it will be false. False means no. Now this is basically the set that I show you, that whenever something click set OTP input, we have to run this function. It will run this function. So we will see this later. Okay, one more thing is that you have this thing, add a reset function to wipe the content element or reset action for inputs. So just check it. Now if you are if you used Bubble, then you know that we have a reset function, reset a group pop-up. So whenever we select the input, for example, if I select OTP input, for example, here it is not showing, maybe due to some reason, but if I select that element, then it will call this function, this reset function. So we will see this in next video. In this video we will just add some inputs into this, so it will look like if I select, let me delete it. If I select 4 character, it should show 4 inputs, and all the work that is if I type something, it should focus into the next element, something like that. This should work in this video. So now let's start building this plugin. So I have opened the last code editor, that is last code that we used in my previous video, and then we also have the browser open it. So now click go live, so it will open this here. So now this is the last video where we come from. Now we have to change some data. For example, I want to use a separate CSS file, so I can write style.css, and I can move it into separate CSS file. And save it, and now here I can link it. I just delete the style tags, that is not needed. So link and tab, just press tab, it will auto complete to this. Now press /, that means in current folder we will select the style.css. Now if I save it, now refresh it, it will just work fine, because this is now coming from CSS and applying to this. Now it works. Now for example, we don't have any option to add this input directly. Instead we have some JavaScript function that will run by Bubble. So just remove it, and then instead of script.js we have to add 2 functions, that is so initialize.js and update.js. So let's create 2 different files, init.js and update.js. Now we are creating this locally, because so that we can test and update the data easily. You can directly write the code inside here, inside your code editor, but I prefer to run and test inside my local editor, and once all the things are working fine, I can just copy from these JS files and paste it directly here. That will be much faster. So let's just see. So init.js and update.js. So we don't need the script.js. We need to import init.js. First will be init.js, init.js, and then I have to use update.js. Now input are gone because there is no input. We have to add the input from our JavaScript file. Okay, now just copy the definition from here. Just a second. So we will just work on the init and update. Now it is giving me error because it is not a fully JavaScript syntax. So what you have to do is you have to set a name into it. For example, you have to write here, for example, const set is equal to, and then it's not set, this will be init function. So init, and then call the init function with instance and context. Now we don't have the value of this instance and context. Let's see what is the value of this. So for instance, we have instance canvas publish trigger data, and for context we don't need it. For properties it is these values. So just let build this locally as well so that we can test it. Okay, so come here and just you can do that. For example, you can come here and you can paste this. Now this code you can see and you can type it out, and you can pause the video. So what I have done is, for example, let's add context as well. Now we need three variables: instance, context, and properties. Now these values are provided in Bubble editor, that is fine, but how we can get this variable, we have to define it. So similarly, inside instance I am getting the canvas, I am getting the publish date, I am getting the trigger event. Now for canvas we are query selecting this element. So this element is not there in the index.html. So for example, you can consider it as we have a div element with this class. Now this is not constant, this is custom made, you can write anything, but I did plugin element 5323 because to make a unique name. You can type anything, you can type anything here, but you have to add such a way that it should be unique per page. That means that suppose I add plugin in element, for example, if the class is used by some other element inside the Bubble page, then it will interfere with the element. All the style might refer to that element as well. So that is why I'm using a 4 or 5 letter text or character, so that it should be unique per page. Okay, now I'll save it. Now that is why I'm selecting it. So that is the Bubble element that is given by Bubble, this instance.canvas. Now publish date, trigger event, so that I already said that I am just giving a function, I am just console logging it so that we know that this function is called, and data is just empty object by default. Properties, we have these 4 properties: character count 4, autofocus true, disable false, input type text. These are given by Bubble. Context, I am not using it, that is why I am just adding a curly braces, so to make a empty object. So this is a init. Now for init we have to do something. Now for example, first thing what I have to do is to add this class name to this div. For example, Bubble will give me this div, for example, this div. Now I have to add this custom class into it so that we can refer it in a style.css or something like that. So for example, first I have to do instance.canvas. So instance.canvas is this div without the class we will add now into this. So now we'll canvas.classList.add this text. Okay, now if I just I can just remove it from here. This is a empty div. Just a second. Okay, now I added the class list into this canvas, so that will work. Now why I added in init, because I need only, it should be run only once on page load. That's it, that is why. Now come to the update. Now similarly use const update is equal to, and just call the update function here. Now we have instance, properties, and context value currently, and in initialize just call this as instance context. We don't have properties value here. Okay, now come to the update, and here we will add our logic, that is we will add the input elements here. Okay, so for example I have to start a loop. Basically we in previous video we have seen for each loop. Okay, now in this video I will show you a simple for loop. For example, that start with like this: for let I is equal to 0, I less than is equal to, for example, 4, and I plus plus. Now if I console log it and if I print I, then in console you can see it run 4 times, 0 1 2 3, that I said that it start from 0, that is why. So 0 1 2 3, and then when the value is 4, so I's value is 4, so 4 less than 4 is false, so that it doesn't run this console log 4. This is similar to for each loop. So now inside here I have to add the input. So let's say con input is equal to document dot create element. So we are creating the element input, and then we have to use class list dot add. Now class, why we need to add the class? So that we can access it inside this OTP input element, right? So inside input class list we are adding the class, that is OTP input. Now it will not show here because it is not appended to the the canvas, it is not appended into the document object, that is why. So let's just add it. So basically we know instance.canvas. So instance.canvas, that means this element, so we will add here basically. So instance.canvas.append child. Append child is a function provided by JavaScript, and we will pass the input as a parameter. If I save it, then you see we have the 4 inputs. Now if I select the input, then you can see the width is 40 pixel because it is defined here, so it is getting applied into it. Now just for information, Bubble also has some styling. So to replicate that, here I am just taking this and I am just adding, for example, width is 200 pixel. Now this will not need to add ourselves, it will be added by Bubble, for example. So with 200 pixel, that means in here we put this 200 pixel if we put here. So now this is 350, so we can put 350 here. So here I can put 350 pixel. Now if I save it, now one more thing we have to do is that this OTP input should not be inside global level, so that if I am something use outside, if I am using OTP input class outside this plugin element, that also that style will be get applied to. We don't want it. We want to apply styles of OTP input inside this element only. That is why we have to prefix this with plugin input element 233. Now this will work just as fine, but it will, if I use OTP input class outside this element, this will not work. That is how CSS selector work. Now if I write something, it will not work because we did not add any JavaScript into it. So let's add it. So before that we also make this dynamic. So remember, if I just console log properties, it will show you the properties. This is a object and we have these values: autofocus, car count. So for example, instead of making it 4, which is constant, we want to make it dynamic. So now if I do properties dot car count, that will work just fine. But now if I just make it as a 5 and save it, it will make 5 input. So that is why it make it dynamic. Now similarly, let's use the other data as well. Car input type. So basically the input dot type will be properties dot input type. Similarly, input dot disabled will be properties dot disabled. Autofocus we will see later. Now if I change the data here, for example, I already show you by making it 5. Now for example, if I use disabled is equal to true, then save it, then it will show it going around disabled field. If I go false, and if I just do as a input type number, so you can see this has input type of number. Now if I change it to password, it will work as a password. So this you see as a dot. So now if I just change back to text, so it will be like text. Okay, now this actually added the data inside this, add the class and all the data. Now what we have to do is we have to add the input event listener, so that if I type something, it should move the focus into the next element. So let's just copy from our old code. So we need this data. Okay, we first element input. So let's do this inside this loop. Okay, let me show you how. So just copy it, this loop from previous code, and I'm just pasting it inside update. Now all inputs, I'm not defining all inputs, so copy that as well. Okay, now let's see if any changes we need to do or not. Array.from, that is to make the node as array, that I already discussed previously. Now documents.query selected all OTP input, that is fine, it will select this all element. But one issue is that I don't, if the OTP input class name is used in other place, that means that also will be selected here, that we don't want. So instead of document.query selected all, we will see instance.canvas.query selected all. So that means it will be like select this element and see if OTP input is there or not, like this. It will select this element and it will see that how many OTP input are there, so it will select it. All inputs are there. Now input event listener input, and it will just see data. This all the things are already working. Now the complete thing we will do some later, so I'm just commenting it out because we need to handle it in our way, in plugin way, not in Toolbox plugin. So I disabled it, I commented it out, and now we have this key up. Another thing, it should work. Now if I just refresh it sometime something, it is working. Okay, it is working, that we see in the last video. But autofocus is not working. If I refresh it, autofocus is not working because we didn't add this code. So now let's add inside this event listener. So let's see how we can do it. So we are looping it now. So basically what we have to do, if index is 0, we will use triple equal. So if index is 0, that means this element, then we have to focus it. So if index is 0 and if autofocus is enabled, so properties.autofocus. Now if this is a boolean value, then we can just reference it as a properties autofocus. So it will read as if this is true, then the condition will be run. So if index is 0 and autofocus is enabled, then we will run that input element dot focus. Let's see if it works or not. If I refresh, then see it is focusing the first element. I'm just deleting the console log that we added here. For example, if I just delete the autofocus to false, now this condition will not run, and if I refresh, see the autofocus is not working, but we want it, so we just making it true, so it is work. So now it is already working all the things, but only one thing is not working, that is to check if OTP is completed or not. So we have to add this code here, but we can also add a function, and we can add data here, and we can just call that function from here. That will make more maintainability. Sorry. So go to init.js instance.canvas.classList add. Now after that I want to add the function so that we can call it later. So we will just add the name as, for example, instance.data, and now we have to name our function name. So I adding check OTP complete. So if I write this as a function, if I console log it as a OTP is completed or not completed. Now I can just, instead of this, I can just call it here. I have to call it as a instance.data.check OTP complete. Now refresh it. Now if I add something, see, OTP is complete is called, that is from initialize. Now I can put this code as a normal function as well, like const check OTP complete, but then it will not work here or in other function. And also I need to only define this function once, because initialize only works once. But if I put this inside update, then that code will run every time this update is called. That I don't want. Okay, so now we are adding, now we have to move this code inside this function. Remove it, just paste it, delete it from here. Now if I just uncomment it, okay, so now we are checking is OTP complete if filter input value is empty, length is equal to 0, then we are triggering this function. Now irrespective of if it is completed or not, we have to trigger these two value and completed. We have to trigger these two state as well. So first of all, let's just take the all inputs, because all inputs is not defined here. So we have to go here and just take this all inputs, copy it and paste inside here. Now it is all inputs. Now we have to get two values. So value is basically this data. Okay, so it will take all the inputs value and join it. Now we also have the completed. We have to also define the completed. So for example, this is this data, all inputs dot filter input value is empty, length is 0 or not. Okay, so that is empty. Now we have to trigger, we have to update the state value so that we can use in Bubble editor. So to do that, we have to use instance dot publish state function, and we have to pass the name of the state, that is value, and we have to pass the actual value, so that is value. Similarly, we have to update the other state as well, completed, and we have to use the completed. Now where this come from, I already show you. This is, we define this is here. Okay, if I add one more state, then we have to also update it whenever required. So now I published it. Now we have to also, if it is completed, for example, if it is completed, we have to publish the data, we have to publish the event. So for that we have to use instance dot trigger event, and then I have to add the name of completed, for example, because this is the completed event name that is coming from here. Now it works. Now let's just refresh it so that we can see if it works or not. Refresh it, 2 3 1 2 2. You can see that whenever let's say I refresh it and I type 1, so you see test state publish 1, completed is not, because completed is false. Now if put 2, then value is 1 2, completed false, because it is not completed yet. 3 1 2 3, completed is false. 4 1 2 3 4, completed true, event trigger completed. That's why the Bubble will run the workflow and it will show the alert message. Now these inputs are not looking very good, so we have to add space between it. So in the style.css, inside this plugin input element, we can add this width is provided by Bubble, so that we will not add it. So this is added by the Bubble, but we will add this data, for example display flex. So this has pure CSS, I am writing it. You can read about CSS something so that you can use it here, or you can ask ChatGPT. So justify content, you have to use we have to use space between, so that proper spacing is done. Then column gap, let's say it's pixel, and then nothing. Now if I do this, now there's a lot of gap are there, so we have to use with 100% instead of some 40 pixels. So now it is working just fine. It is taking the 350 width. That is working. One more thing that I am facing it, that if I just make it as a input type number, then you can see I am seeing this up arrow and down arrow, which I don't want to so we can remove this up arrow and down arrow from this CSS itself. So for different browser we have different fixes, so you can ask ChatGPT. So I already ChatGPT it, so I have to use this code, Moz appearance text field. So this is for Firefox. Now I am using Chrome, so this will not work obviously. Now for Chrome I have to use this code. So I am selecting OTP input, outer spin button, inner spin button, and WebKit appearance none, margin 0. If I save it, now these things remove this step button. Okay, so now it works. Now let's see that if it works in Bubble Edit or not. Locally it works, so let's see. So first copy the init.js. Don't copy this because these are added by Bubble itself. Just copy inside init function, copy it and add the inside init initialize function. This is done. Now go to update. This is the most important things. Now one more thing I forgot, that we have to also remove the data from it. For example, let me show you. I said that, so for example, after 3 seconds I want to change the input type from 4 to 6. So this update function also works. So for example, if I run like set timeout, after 5 seconds I have to run something, for example, or let's say I want to disable these inputs after 5 seconds. So I have to put 5000 and I have to see properties. I have to change it. For example, properties dot disabled is equal to true, and then I have to call the update function again. Now these things will be called by Bubble, so don't worry, this is for local setup only. So instance properties context. If I save it, then after 5 seconds you can see that this should be disabled. Okay, now this is disabled, previous inputs are not removed, so we have to add the code here. For example, instance dot canvas dot inner HTML is equal to empty. So now if I after 5 seconds, if I refresh after 5 seconds, it will remove this and add the disabled one. It will work so fast that it will look like that the input is disabled. Now that works. Now let's see. Now let's add in the update function here. So copy the update function content body and just paste it here. Preview will not write preview function in this video. We'll do it in this series, of course. Now I'm not adding anything into it. Now we have to use the element code. For example, the styles that I added, this I need to put. Now 3550 I am not adding because it will be added by Bubble itself. So write style and then add the code and just little formatting, and now the style is added. Now if I refresh it, let's see what happens. Nothing will happen because we didn't change anything into the run mode, in the edit mode. So now if I just update it, let's see if it works or not. Now this is showing like a disable input. So am I okay? So I have enabled it, disabled it to true. So I don't want it, so I have enabled it by pressing no here. If I refresh it, if I type something like 3 2 1 3 2, then this 3 2 3 2 is works because we have added this OTP testing completed. We can remove it, other thing we can remove it, just these things. Now this works. Also this you can see OTP is showing and completed is showing. Let me refresh it and show you this again. 3212. Now this is working, and completed is also works just fine. Now why now the alert is not showing? Okay, so this is not working. So let's say, okay, so element so message, change message, OTP is this, OTP is value, refresh it, 432, and this works. Now I can add, you can change this value. For example, if I change this to, let's say 6, and disable no type, input type number, and refresh this page, then it is showing 6 input, then 3, you know, I cannot enter ABCD, something like that, and the backspace is also working fine. Now one thing is that this is not looking good because this text is not showing in center or something like that. Plus I want to change the border color. I want to change the border color from defined from here, and I want to change this bold, etc. That will also not work currently. So in next video, let's do the UI UX part of this. So thanks for watching this video, and if you are agency looking for custom plugin developer, you can hire me. Details are in the description. Thank you for watching.